Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausum Pereira. US officials and Taliban representatives have signed a final peace deal after months of negotiations in Qatar's capital to end the United States' longest war fought in Afghanistan. Saturday's agreement, signed in Doha in the presence of leaders from Pakistan, India, Indonesia, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, will pave the way for the United States to gradually withdraw its troops. The two sides have long wrangled over the US demand for a ceasefire before the final peace agreement was signed. Earlier on Saturday, the Taliban ordered all its fighters to halt fighting and refrain from attacks. Mohammed Naeem, a Taliban representative in Doha, described the deal as a step forward. The US invaded Afghanistan weeks after the September 2001 attacks by the Afghanistan-based al-Qaeda group. More than 2,400 US troops have been killed during the conflict. About 13,000 are still stationed in the country. President Trump has promised to put an end to the conflict. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the deal reached by the US and the Taliban. Joining me on the program today are Meera Shankar, former ambassador to the United States, Major General Ashwini Sivach, retired defense and strategic expert, and Professor A.K. Pasha, Center for West Asian Studies, JNU. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. First, let's analyze and let's hear your thoughts on the deal that was reached earlier on Saturday in Doha.
Look, the US has been exhausted by its long drawn-out involvement in Afghanistan, and this was one of the promises that President Trump had made during his presidential campaign, that he would withdraw and bring back US soldiers. And he had explicitly spoken against US's involvement in these forever wars, as he called them. So in one sense, he's fulfilling a political pledge. But it's beyond just President Trump, because across the spectrum, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, now there is little appetite in the US for continued involvement in Afghanistan. The peace deal has been long in coming. There was one abortive attempt which misfired because the Taliban had recourse to violence and the US backed away from it. But they picked up the threads and they have renegotiated. And this time they kept the window, of a reduction in violence pretty small, just 1 week. If for 1 week there is a reduction in violence and there's no major occurrence of violence, then the peace deal will be signed. Now, the peace deal provides for withdrawal of the remaining more than 13,000 US troops in Afghanistan over a period of 14 months. And a quicker drawdown to 8,600 over the next 100 and something days. So the question for us really is, as the US withdraws, if the conditions on the ground deteriorate, will the US halt its withdrawal or would it continue? It's not very clear as yet, because the deal has just been signed and we don't know what the details are and what the US policy is going to be, because they keep asserting that it will be based on conditions on the ground. Two, will the US retain at the end of it even a kind of residual presence for intelligence and support? Again, we don't know. As of now, it looks that everybody is being withdrawn.
Right.
And finally, the last question would be that with the withdrawal of US forces, would there be that continued commitment to Afghanistan stability? That means that they would have to continue, the international community would have to continue to fund the Afghan army and forces, otherwise it's going to collapse.
Right.
On their own, they have shown the ability to fight back and to, withstand Taliban onslaughts. but they are fully funded from overseas.
Sure.
So if that support is withdrawn, you can see chaos. But if the international community does it in a way where they continue to uphold and support the Afghan government, then it's a different question.
Right.
Then, of course, this is supposed to pave the way in the meanwhile for a political dialogue between the Afghan government and the Taliban. And till now, the Taliban has been refusing to engage with the Afghan government. So we have to see, would they be willing to engage with the Afghan government, or are they going to, concentrate their efforts on overthrowing it?
Absolutely. These are several aspects that we need to look at and that we'll discuss on the program as well. But Professor, let me bring you in now and talk about the deal itself, because like the ambassador mentioned, it is not something that has happened overnight. It has taken place over a long period of time. Clearly looks like everyone involved is fatigued and tired with everything that's been happening in Afghanistan. So what made this happen really?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is the long drawn out, inconclusive war which US along with NATO partners has been fighting endlessly and taking huge casualties and thousands of injured. And this has spread to over 32 countries who have been taking part in this mammoth effort to stabilize Afghanistan for the last 19 years. The war weariness is the most fundamental thing. The second one is the cost. The financial aspect also has been impacting the United States. Billions and billions of dollars have been spent, and it needs quite a strong financial backing in the background of American commitments elsewhere, because this was seen as a hopeless war, not achieving the desired goals of evicting the Taliban and other extremist forces. Thirdly, there was this issue of Pakistan, that Pakistan's full concurrence or support was not forthcoming. And I think over a period of time, the United States has been able to persuade and extract commitments from Pakistan that they will not sabotage the deal by supporting Taliban and overrunning the government in Kabul. The vulnerability of the Afghan government, Abdul Ghani's government, is well known. At one stage, it was being said that this government rules only the Kabul city and some peripheral parts. But over a period of time, the Afghan National Security Forces, they have been able to inch their way to many more areas, but not to the extreme east and south. So the Taliban still has its strongholds in the east, and obviously it is because of their link with Pakistan, where the supplies, the lifeline comes from that. The other element, interesting element over the last couple of months has been the statements emanating from Taliban that they are not entirely 100% with Pakistan. Differences have cropped up. And this is where the Americans saw light at the end of the tunnel, that we must, because in the Doha they found different streams of thought.
Professor, since you mentioned Doha, why Doha?
Doha, because the Taliban opened their office. That is the only place they have been officially allowed to open their office. Of course, they had earlier in UAE and Saudi Arabia, but they were expelled after the government fell in 90s. But Doha was consciously agreed by the Americans, the Saudis, earlier when they were on track, and the Afghan government also gave its consent. So officially, the embassy or the office is there of the Taliban, functioning for more than 2.5, 3 years, and there have been regular contacts even when Khalmai Zalilzad was not actively present. So there have been structured dialogue even after September when it collapsed. So in that way, the Russians tried, the Chinese tried, the Iranians tried, the Turks tried, to have their own share in the peace deal. But I think Americans ultimately were able to persuade the Taliban to reach this stage where we have seen this final agreement to bring peace to Afghanistan.
Okay,
it doesn't say
there will be peace, everlasting peace. That's
to
another,
bring peace.
Yes, that's another challenge, of course, whether we will see
And
peace.
the other point I have, my concern is, you see, the Americans have bases in Afghanistan, like they had in Iraq when they decided to withdraw from the Iraqi state. Who will own those bases, whether it will remain under American control or they will hand over the sovereign control to the Afghan government, that remains to be seen.
Absolutely.
The Bargan base in Kabul is one of the largest.
Sure. Let me take those points to the general as well. So this is another big, worrisome factor going forward, General. What's going to happen to all these bases, the equipment, the infrastructure that the Americans have built in Afghanistan? Are they going to destroy it and go back? Are they going to hand it over to someone? How much of a challenge is all that going to be for the region?
Frank, this itself is a very question mark. As we see this deal, what has happened today, there are certain grey areas in this. One is that, of course, now once the first thing was truce was signed, that 7 days was a period where the reduction in violence was there. Obviously, it hold on, 80% of violence has reduced and a peace agreement has been signed. Now, how things unfold hereafter are very important. Now, 2-3 factors which are very important are that one is that intra-Afghan talk starts now. That is Afghanistan government, then Taliban and other armed rebels groups which will have to participate. Now, all three have to start participating. Our problem is, as far as the Afghan government is concerned, now the Afghan government, the Ashraf Ghani though has been declared as a winner, but Abdullah has not accepted. Now, that one problem, grey area are that who will be the one who will be representing the Afghanistan government. Of course, we think it should be Ashraf Ghani, but how will they play on with Abdullah the way they did last time in 2014, that a unity government is been chaired there in Afghanistan. Point number 2, which is there, is that once the talks start on and once this period start, as far as Americans are concerned, reduction of troops from 13,000 to 8,600 in 135 days. Now, the problem comes is what is the violence level there? In case the ceasefire is declared, the ceasefire has not been officially declared. Now, this will dictate what will be the outcome thereafter. In case the ceasefire does not hold or violence increases, then Americans will think twice to leave Afghanistan after 14 months. So, that is another thing. Now, as far as Americans are concerned, they are quite worried whether Afghanistan National Army can hold or not. This is what we have also given our apprehension to Donald Trump and also to American government. The Afghan National Army may not able to hold on to Taliban in case things go wrong. So, is it America going to leave everything after 14 months, or it is going to leave some basis, in the sense a retaliatory force in terms of air power? Because as on today, though the strength is 13,000, but it is the air power which is of American is making a difference. The drones attack, the air armed attack helicopter, which has been supporting this Afghan army. So, this problem will come today, whether Americans will decide to vacate everything, or they will keep some retaliatory force in support of Afghanistan government.
Right.
Now, the another question comes is that what will be the shape of the new government which is forming up? That the 3-4 contenders which are there is, one is Taliban, second is Afghanistan government, third thing is another Afghan tribal, armed tribals which are also there. So, they all have to now sit down, try to negotiate and come to a via media what will be the new government look like.
Absolutely.
As far as India interest is concerned,
We'll come to India in just a bit.
I am just trying to bring out this issue is that here comes the catch, because now till now the Indian government was following that we will like not to have any negotiation with Taliban, and we want Afghan-led, Afghan controlled and Afghan monitored sort of peace talk. Now we have agreed to be there when this negotiation is been signed. So, this is the first step. This is the second time which we are doing it after November 18, where in Moscow there was a sort of a talk between Taliban and the Russians. There are two non-officials have gone.
Correct.
Till then, otherwise we have never have any contact with Taliban government after Kandahar. So we had not a very good relation.
Sure.
We think that as far as Taliban is concerned, it cannot be, you can not rely on them. They cannot be dependent upon it. But we are now also changing. We are now realizing ground realities are that we must soften up. We should be realistic. We should be relevant and try to negotiate whosoever will come into power.
Points taken.
So because the stakes are very high, as you are saying, we will discuss that issue later.
No, we'll discuss it right now.
The stakes are very high.
Let me take the points that you're making to the other panelists as well, and I'll come back to you for a reaction on that. We've taken quite a bit of time in our opening remarks, so I'm going to ask you to be brief in our second round now. Ambassador, starting first with you, what does all of this mean for India?
Well, India's concern is that the process of American withdrawal should not leave a vacuum in the region which is filled by extremists or terrorists, nor should it lead to a situation of civil war in Afghanistan, which would put at risk a lot of the development that India has been engaged in Afghanistan. We are quite exposed because we have given aid of $3 billion, and we have a large number of projects in which our people have been, on which our people have been working. So their security becomes an issue. I think for India also, the concern is that whatever shape the new regime emerges after peace talks, if peace talks are successful, we don't know whether they will be, at least the gains that were made, you know, in terms of political pluralism, that it's not just under one party, be in terms of protection of minorities and women's rights, and the surrender of arms by some of the armed groups. I think, and the, you know, giving up of terrorism as an instrument, all these issues need to be on the table, and we shouldn't squander the gains that have been made. Finally, of course, it's for the Afghan people to decide. You know, we've always said it should be an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned process. I think another concern for India would be that as Pakistan cooperates with the US through this period in delivering the Taliban for the peace process, it should not get the feeling that it has, because it's cooperating with the US on this side, that it has a free run in terms of moving jihadi and terrorist groups to the Western Front.
Absolutely.
I think that would be one of India's core concerns, and therefore we've insisted that the US cannot ease up pressure on terrorism, and one of the conditions really for the peace process to succeed is that continued pressure to dismantle terrorist groups and bases and support needs to be there.
Absolutely. And Professor, you know, I'm going to take forward a point that the General was making. You know, we were invited to the signing of the agreement in Doha earlier today. What does all of this mean for India, and what should we do going forward, really, if we want to be a relevant player in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, our ambassador in Doha, P. Kumaran, he was invited, he went there as an observer to witness the signing ceremony. That apart, you see the developments in Afghanistan as they unfold, some of it have been highlighted. They are of two natures. One is Taliban is one key element in this process. You also have al-Qaeda, you have the Islamic State, and at least 2-3 extremist groups. Some of them who fought in Syria, in Libya, also have reached Afghanistan. This is quite a worrisome factor. So even if the Taliban have signed, whether these Taliban have control over these armed groups, that's my biggest concern. The other is during the 80s and 90s, when there was trouble in Kashmir, we had become used to seeing foreign fighters, Taliban, and quite a lot of them were able to reach Kashmir and create mayhem. And that is the fear I have, the security implications flowing either directly or in connivance with Pakistan because of the developments in Kashmir since 5th August and what so far we have been able to do or not do. That's a major concern. And I think in this connection, our links with the United States are of prime importance.
Sure.
And I see the visit of President Trump as one of the indicators why the government went out of the way to have a very grand and lavish welcome from Ahmedabad to Delhi, even though it was a short visit. But the strategic importance and what we were able to convey and what we were able to get from the United States, that things will not degenerate in Afghanistan.
Right.
Suddenly that the Taliban will take over and Pakistan will have the strategic space which they have been angling for decades, that will become a danger. So in that way, the US-India relations, our concerns, the United States has understood over the last 4 or 5 months, because one of the reasons for our move, it was speculated because of the imminent signing of the US-Taliban deal in September,
right,
and the implications flowing through Pakistan to Kashmir.
So
in that way, the Kashmir issue is very sensitive, and in this, whatever leverage the United States has over Pakistan would be of immense importance.
Sure.
Although the Chinese have been increasing the influence over economic, military and other support to Pakistan, but that is seen over civilian government.
Right.
But the military remains still the backbone of support for the United States, because they are dependent on a variety of issues on the US military support, financial support.
Sure.
So in that way, the US factor is very important.
Sure, absolutely. This issue of Pakistan, General, do you believe with everything that's happening in Afghanistan, with Pakistan now being relevant suddenly in the region, they're going to get adventurous on the LOC as well?
Absolutely. There are 4 or 5 things which stands out. One is what we are talking about as far as Taliban is concerned. In case the pressure reduces in Afghanistan, some sort of negotiation are there. There is a chance of Taliban coming toward even our part of Jammu and Kashmir. That threat is live. We must understand. Second thing is that Islamic State and al-Qaeda, which is in north and northeast of Afghanistan, flowing toward our side also is possibility. 2 things are these. And third thing which we are there is that since Pakistan has played a pivotal role in getting this negotiation deal between America and Taliban, to some extent, we are worried that America may not able to put the same pressure which is required against Lashkar-e-Toba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Because we have been telling that not only that Pakistan is adventurous, but it has not reigned any terrorist group which are operating against India. Notwithstanding that they are going to be almost downgraded from grey to a blacklist. But as far as Lashkar-e-Toba, Jaish-e-Mohammed is concerned, there is not much except Hafiz Saeed has been only put behind bar for 11 years, and the chances is that he may get some sort of redress once he challenges in higher court. So our worry is that America should not reduce that pressure on Pakistan, especially against Lashkar-e-Toba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. That is very important for it. Third thing which is there is that our heavy investment in Chabar. As far as we are concerned, that Afghanistan is strategically very important for India. We have now invested almost $3+ billion. We have constructed strategic road Dalaram-Jairanj with the aim that it will now come and connect with Chabar, and we will then be connected with Afghanistan and Central Asian state, Eastern Europe and Russia. Our trade has to go through Chabar. We have managed to get it from America, some sort of concession that Katsa will not be put on developing Chabar, as well as the railway line which is going from Chabar to Jaidan and to then Hajik Gak, which is a mineral resources in Afghanistan. So all this has been done with the aim that Afghanistan remain peaceful. In case Afghanistan is not peaceful, and our investment in Chabar will suffer. And
Sure.
in case if we have managed to maintain a good relation in Afghanistan, we are relevant there, then our trade with Afghanistan and Central Asian state through Chabahar will continue. The third and fourth thing which is there is, as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan is interested that whatever it may come, that India should not play a positive role in Afghanistan.
Right.
Because for them, Afghanistan is their strategic depth.
Sure.
So they are doing everything to attain that. We should try to counter that. That is main thing. Now, as far as the other armed tribal groups are there is a Pashtun group also there. We are having good relation with Pashtun. There we should also try to encash on that.
Right.
It is not only Taliban, there are other armed tribal groups which will become part of this deal, and also the Afghan government, where we have a leverage because they know it that we have invested heavily. And
So we should
we
do
are
everything
people
possible.
to people contact is very important. My point is that we have developed schools, hospital and community development center for empowerment of women,
Okay.
children and
Points
minority. So our challenge is this, and I am sure that we have taken all this in consideration by R.P. Kumaran attending the Doha, and Doha as an observer, we have given a sort of now hint that we are ready to change.
Right.
We will remain irrelevant in Afghanistan, which is a requirement of the day.
Okay, very limited time. So yes, Professor, you wanted to say something very quickly.
I was going to talk about Chabahar. Although for Afghanistan this is very important, but I think we have a long-term vision about why we are developing and cooperating with Iran. It is for bilateral energy, trade, investment. It's a huge complex, and also beyond to Central Asia and Russia and
Sure.
Europe. So in that way, Afghanistan is one aspect of why we have gone to Chabahar.
Okay,
So we
all right.
must keep the big picture in mind.
All right, very limited time, 20 seconds left. Ambassador, closing comments from you.
Well, closing comments means really that there's a new situation now, which we will have to contend with in the region. Till now, we have taken it for granted, in a sense, over the last few years, that US presence in Afghanistan will prevent Afghanistan from descending into chaos.
Right.
And now that is not going to be the case.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
it means there's a kind of a complete shift in the position, and India has to marshal all its resources, flexibility,
Right.
and determination
Sure. Okay.
to deal with the situation. We have to provide support, perhaps a little more support on security to the Afghan forces,
Right.
perhaps by training, perhaps by providing more weapons and equipment, maybe more airlift like
Sure.
helicopters.
Those are options
I
that we'll
think
have to
those are
work out in the
options.
days to come.
Yeah.
Very quickly, General, because I'm really out of time on the program.
Yeah, Frank, absolutely correct. We have to be dynamic. As the situation unfolds, we should change it. But we can support, as far as Afghan government is concerned, Afghan army is concerned, in a big way. As far as the first is training, which is there, training of their armed personnel, training of their security forces. And also what we can do is we can also provide them equipment. We can also provide them some arms ammunition.
Okay.
We have given them Me-25,
Completely out of
35.
time. I'm sorry I
and
have to
so
cut you
therefore,
short, General.
what I'm saying is relevant. Provide them all the facility so that they become strong enough to face the challenges which are required to be done.
Okay,
in
there are
time to
several-
come.
To redouble our diplomatic efforts with China, with Turkey, with Russia, and also the Central Asian state, and
Okay.
Iran also is
Okay,
very
there are
important.
lots of
player.
options really, whether we need to wait and see how it pans out and what really we can do. These are some of the options that India has, is what the panelists are suggesting. We'll also have to see how things pan out in Afghanistan itself. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. See you again next time.